Israel apartheid, or apartheid Israel, and then one of the security guards shouts "scum" at me, and they get kind of physical with me. They start like grab me by my hands, and then there's lots of police in there. I mean, obviously it's not illegal to put a banner out. That's called freedom of speech, right? I mean, everyone's allowed to do it. And Israel is an apartheid state, so that's the least we could do. We didn't interrupt anything. We didn't shout anything. We put up banners. It's a silent protest. You know, who does that harm, right? And you know, they're the ones that get allowed. They're allowed to put on their national theater here. You know, all these things. They're the ones that have the privileges, right? We just go in and protest, put up banners. We don't say anything. We just let the word speak, right? And that's apparently the truth is apparently too much for these people. You know?
Well, we made a very dignified and silent protest with banners and flags. What we were pointing out was that Habima is a company that represents Israel. They play in the settlements, they're colluding with Israeli apartheid, and they should never have been allowed to come here and perform. They're not just actors, they're cultural ambassadors for an apartheid state, that is Israel. And we had banners that said Free Palestine and Palestinian flags. And we made a very dignified and silent protest, and I think we made our point very well, and some of us stood there with our mouths covered to signify that while Israel plays, the Palestinians are kept quiet and denied the ability to talk about their own identity, to have their own life, to have their own land, to have their own human rights, and the audience is colluding in this. And I have to say, I don't think the audience enjoyed it that much, in spite of the forced laughter, because lots of them were leaving from the exits before the end of the first half. And I don't blame them.
The director of the Globe Theatre, he made this announcement in person on the stage before any of the play began. The disturbing thing about the director's comment at the beginning, he says, remember, these performers are not politicians. They're bringing you culture. Bringing the whole series, Globe. So he was trying to reinforce this pretense. Art, culture, theater, being totally separated from politics.
You know, they have electronic things that tell you the words in English, what they're doing, so we were just held the banner next to that. And we were just doing a silent protest, and then they just came. Yeah, we were just at the front of the balcony.
The banners said, freedom for Palestine, Israeli apartheid off the stage, justice for Palestine, freedom and justice for Palestine, no to Israeli apartheid. You had to go through a metal detector, have your bag searched. Not body checks, we just concealed them in our clothes. So their actual security wasn't that good.
Several of us had banners that we were going to display when people came back from the first interval, but there was no first interval. So we were waiting, and I began to wonder, will there even be a second interval? And then the whole place seemed compressed. So eventually, I just was looking for some logical time to hold up my banner, and then it came, Bassanio's trial, where Shylock is going to demand the pound of flesh. So that's when I held up the banner, Justice for Palestinians.
There is the actors come along dressed like in a party, but what he does, the Merchant of Venice appears on the stage, old, like an old Jew, and the actors attacked the Merchant of Venice. And the play starts after that.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
So,
added that to the play.
Yeah, added. I mean, I would have liked to intervene when he was beaten up. in the sense that you say that's exactly what you're doing to the Palestinians, but because we were together, people waited until it was quiet and the actors came onto the stage and started talking. But I think it would have been a different thing because it was the OG was abused, and it would have been good as well to say, well, that's exactly what you're doing to it.
At the beginning, the director came on and asked the audience not to intervene in any way. And I think that's what they did, because they knew that if they intervened it would make more disruption. So I think they bit their lips, much against the grain, because I think they were just dying to have a go.
What was the audience response?
Well, actually not much response at all. Nobody shouted at me or any of that, which I kind of
good.
But there were two women behind us who were just really upset by the way the security guards treated us, and they've given us their names in case because we were a little bit hurt by the security guards, so they've given us their names in case we want to take a case against the police or in case they decide to charge us, and they left.
So the police were quite rough then?
The police weren't, but the security were. Or they obviously weren't trained.
Security.
No, they had security they brought in who obviously weren't trained. Show and event. Show and event limited. Who had obviously been brought in and who very obviously, I mean, I wouldn't want to blame the individual guys, but they obviously weren't trained for what they were doing. So they've really hurt most of us, like on our arms, because of the way they carried us out.
Security didn't take me out because some of my colleagues clung on for dear life and it caused so much disturbance. They decided to leave me where I was. But some of the people in the pit were handled fairly roughly when they were taken out, and some of my friends upstairs were manhandled and dragged quite severely across the benches. Yes. So I think they wanted to avoid a fuss, which is why they didn't do that to everybody. But yeah, I think they were quite rough with the first people they took out, yes.
And they obviously had lots of security on the ground who very clearly had spotted us before the event.
How do you know that?
Because I could see them. He was like going,
Right. Subtle.
yeah. But maybe we weren't.
Did they have the earpieces?
Yeah, yeah. So they all had little no, they had little pink armbands, but they were obviously.
So I believe in a full cultural, academic and economic boycott of Israel until they, allow the right of refugees to return to Palestine, and until they dismantle the occupation, and until there is full equality for Palestinians living within, what's currently called Israel. And I think that's an entirely reasonable demand. And just as lately as today, I saw people calling for, full economic boycotts of Syria, full economic boycotts of Iran, full economic boycotts of all these other countries, right? And so why is Israel the exception? We're always asked, why do you single out Israel? Why do you always target Israel? No, but it's not us that target Israel. It's that our governments don't want to target Israel, right? So somebody has to do it. If the politicians don't want to do it, then we have to do it. And so that's why I believe in a full boycott. The atrocities and the illegalities there are just so glaringly obvious if you go and see it, or if you talk to any Palestinian, right? So even any Palestinian here or any Palestinian diaspora, they'll tell you the stories from their families. So to me, it's very obvious. I have no sort of vested interest in this conflict, right? I'm not Muslim, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Arab, nothing like that. It's just, I see things on the TV, you go and talk to actual people, and you go and visit the places. It's very obvious, very obvious. Blatant racism wherever you walk, you go to Jerusalem, you see the light rail that goes through the city, but it only connects the center of the city to the settlement, right? Palestinians aren't allowed on the rail. I went to see the wall in Bethlehem. It's obvious that it's complete racism. It's apartheid, right? The friends I was staying with there, when they were kids, before they were teenagers, they were shot by the Israeli military. They go to sleep and they have IDF soldiers with sniper rifles up in the towers in Bethlehem by the wall, right? It's like, what kind of life is that? They live in refugee camps. They were born in refugee camps, and they've lived their entire life in refugee camps. It's terrible, You go to Jerusalem, to the western bit of Jerusalem, and you see just how much wealth there is there, right? And how privileged people are there. And then you go to Bethlehem, and it's a completely different world. It's like 20 minutes away, and people there live in intense poverty and are victims of racism on a daily basis, right? So, I mean, to me, it's very obvious. If people go and see it with their own eyes, it's very obvious, right? Either you're with humanity or you're against equality